Thank you, Alex. And yeah, I have the pleasure of closing out the conference. So really great conference again. So yeah, my name's Elliot Swartz. I'm a scientist at GFI working on cultivated meat. And I just wanted to give an overview of some of the work that we're doing, that we've completed, that we plan on doing, and that we hope to collaborate with all of you on. Because basically, none of the work that we can do make it impactful enough unless you are all sort of involved in the process. So just quickly, for those that are not aware of the Good Food Institute, GFI is a network of international nonprofits, so we're backed by philanthropy, and we really just are trying to create an innovation ecosystem around alternative proteins. So we do work across science and technology, corporate engagement, and policy. We have now over 200 people spread across the world in 6 key regions that are listed there. So who actually works on cultivated meat at GFI? So yeah, we've grown over the past few years, and now we have dedicated staff in different regions that are working on cultivated meat. There's now 9 of us that work either full-time or part-time on cultivated meat, depending on the bandwidth in their regions. And so if you're in these respective regions and you don't know who these scientists are, it would be a good job, or a good idea to familiarize yourself with who they are. They can help you out, answer questions, get to know the work that you're doing, because we're there to sort of support you in many different ways. And so, yeah, our emails are not like a mystery. They're all our first name and the first letter of our last name. They're all publicly available on our website, so don't feel afraid to ever get in touch with us. So what do we actually do? I get this question a lot, and I got a question here at this conference. But I'd say to summarize, I think the scientists at GFI, we try to support the growth of the scientific ecosystem in many different ways in our regions. And key to that is really understanding where the industry is today and where it's going, so that we can predict some of the future bottlenecks that are going to be facing this industry, whether they're technical, economic, or other. And we also articulate these challenges and share potential solutions in resources that are tailored for different audiences, whether you're a policymaker, a student, an entrepreneur, a company looking to get involved. Many people's first introduction to cultivated meat is now probably reading a GFI resource. And we have the added benefit of having a research grants program. So when we're thinking about these challenges, we can turn those into research opportunities and fund research and also educate other funders around the world. So to effectively be able to actually understand the progress and challenges of the industry, we need an open line of communication with the industry. So that means researchers in academia, that means scientists at companies, et cetera. And some of the ways that we've been doing that recently on the scientific side is through surveys and workshops. So I'll give some examples of that. And then further, we want to be able to build models that reflect the current and future state of the cultivated meat industry, whether these are environmental impact models, cost models, or other models. We want these to sort of stand the test of time. We want the assumptions that go into these models to reflect the actual practices of the industry. And so we need to work collaboratively on those sorts of analyses. So an example of the first analysis that we did was actually started in 2019 with trying to understand what are the costs and the environmental impacts of cultivated meat when it's at scale. And we set that in 2030 just as a sort of example. We selected the contractor CE Delft to actually do the work. So they're an independent research firm in the Netherlands. And importantly, GFI sort of served as, as the technical sort of consultant on the study, but more so we are convener of collaborators on the study. And so you can see we had 15 different collaborators that participated in these studies, including 5 cultivated meat manufacturers, many of whom are in the room today. And these studies wouldn't have been possible without, these companies being involved to inform the assumptions. And so these studies were published as white papers in 2021. Many people probably have read them or are familiar with them. And we also updated the life cycle assessment and published that in a peer-reviewed journal earlier this year. So that was a great start because it provided a sort of high-level overview, gave us a good idea of what are the big buckets in cost drivers, environmental impact drivers, so that we can have a research roadmap for further lines of inquiry. Another example of that is sort of what follows from those studies is what comes out is growth factors and other recombinant proteins. They cost a lot to produce, and there can also be an environmental impact driver depending on how much you need. And so I led another analysis to dive further into the question around growth factors. How much is going to be needed? What cost should they be manufactured at, et cetera? And for this, again, collaboration was key. So I collaborated with 3 recombinant protein producers that are all using different production platforms, whether that's microbial fermentation, molecular farming in plants, cell-free systems. Built a model, and pretty simple back-end model, but they were able to sort of work with me on that model and also write and educate about what processes they're developing in order to address some of these cost and environmental challenges. We also recruited the Future Ready Food Safety Hub in Singapore to write about some of the regulatory considerations if you're a recombinant protein manufacturer hoping to sell into the cultivated meat ecosystem. So that analysis is available online. It was published earlier this year, just as a white paper resource. And I won't go into the data of all these analyses here, but just one thing that sticks out is, when you start to do the back of the envelope math, and we've heard this at this conference, basically a lot of the protein demand, if it was produced all recombinantly, would be albumin, and then furthermore, transferrin and insulin. Growth factors are a very small piece of the pie. And so what follows from that is, you want to ideally not produce those recombinantly and source those from other things like plants or algae. And so we were able to design our research grants priority to fund research into those solutions. So that's just an example of how you turn, a bottleneck that we can foresee into actionable research that everyone can benefit from. Cell lines is another interesting topic that we get a lot of questions about. People want to know, what are people working with, what species, how are they sourcing these cells? What are the regulatory, religious considerations around cell sourcing, et cetera? So we surveyed the industry, designed a pretty broad, detailed set of questions, surveyed the industry. We collected responses from 44 companies, so a really robust data set. Some of the graphs are shown there, but again, this report was published. It's open, published earlier this summer. I'd really encourage you to read that if you're a cell line producer. This gives a lot of insight into what people actually want when you're trying to make a cultivated meat cell line. And I would be remiss to say that we still need to, as a field, increase the availability of cell lines. And so we have a public database on our website that you can, if you're open to sharing your cell lines, you want to collaborate with people, you can contact Manasa. She's now sort of leading these cell line development efforts at GFI. And we also have a repository partnership with Carafast, which is a company that will house your cells and sell them to people that want to purchase them. So there's a few cell lines in there, but we have a ways to go. So really encourage you, people with cell lines, to start sharing. All right, but there's also a lot of questions on bioprocessing. So people want to know, what scale are these companies at today? What are they thinking about in the near future? What sort of challenges are they having? And so we surveyed the industry to try to get a lay of the land of, sort of where progress is to date. We collected responses from 30 companies that I think provides a pretty representative data set of the range of companies and the stages of their advancement in the field. These are some graphs that show some of the data that will be in this report. What sort of modes of operation are people running with their bioreactors? What size are the bioreactors they're using, et cetera? So this work is being led by Faraz, who's our bioprocess scientist, with support from me. We're working on the final draft of that now. Hopefully we'll be out in a couple of months. And I think that will be a really useful report for people as well. Another survey that we're doing, so we're looking at inputs as well. We have a survey on omega-3s. Omega-3 content is really important from a consumer standpoint for seafood in particular. It's perceived as a healthy fat. But we also know through further previous work that the way that we source omega-3s today from microalgae, the supply chain is actually not that big. And if alternative proteins or alternative seafood products were actually to grow, the supply chain would actually be pretty, pressed. And so there's a lot of ways that you can source omega-3s, not just from microalgae, but other production systems like the ones listed down there. And so we're interested now in collecting data on, if you're a cultivated seafood manufacturer, we want to know how you're sourcing omega-3s, how much of this is in your product today, how much do you foresee it in your future, so we can sort of start to map this out. Claire is our cultivated seafood specialist at GFI, and this survey is live, so if you're a cultivated seafood manufacturer, hopefully you've already received some information about this, but we definitely appreciate you completing these sorts of surveys. So another thing that we've experimented with recently, because we've seen at this conference, cultivated seafood is very far behind. People are struggling to grow the cells just to get cell culture conditions right. And so we have Claire at GFI to really help cultivate this community of seafood researchers to help share resources, understand some of the critical areas of need, and hopefully collaborate a bit more on solutions so things accelerate from a progress perspective. So we hosted, Claire organized a workshop last year. There were over 91 participants that attended, which was great. A good mix of scientists from industry and academia. There's an open access white paper that is available online that summarizes some of the insights and the directions from this report. And I think she's going to be organizing more of these sorts of workshops and networking events so people can get in touch with each other more and more and more in the future. So if you're working on seafood and you don't know Claire, introduce yourself. All right, so on 5 years ago, I was actually on the stage at this conference, and I was talking about how the industry needs to generate an open cost model for cultivated meat. And Alex took this picture, and he just took another picture of me where I'm going to say the same thing. So I am once again telling you that we're going to plan another techno-economic study, and we are going to want some of your collaboration and help on this. So at a high level, I think there's been a few studies that have been published, but the gap is really that these studies tend to focus strictly on stirred tank reactors at 10 or 20,000 liter scale. But we know that there's people working and developing a lot of different processing systems. So we really haven't covered the broad base of really understanding what are the techno-economics of cultivated meat production. So at a high level, this study is designed where it's really more open-ended. And when you say, I'm going to give you $100 million, you can spend it on CapEx and you have to build a facility, and tell me the best process to do that, maximizing yield for production. Don't really care too much about OpEx at this point for this particular study. But importantly, we're going to ask the contractor that we hire for this work to not just look at stirred tanks, but also look at airlift designs, also hollow fiber processes. They'll go through many iterations with different bioreactor sizes and modes of operation, et cetera. And I think this can be a really insightful analysis for the field when especially companies are thinking about sinking $100 million into a new facility. You want to be informed. So we actually are working in the process of selecting a contractor to partner with for this study, hopefully soon. But we expect this work to kick off probably in 2024 and last up to 9 months. We might have data by the end of next year, et cetera. But be on the lookout, because we want to collaborate with anyone that's at sort of any sort of scale using these sorts of bioreactor systems so that we can have the assumptions for these studies be best informed by the industry and have the highest utility and impact for all the different stakeholders that will eventually read it. So Elliot, how do I find out about these things that you're doing? These all sound very fun to participate in. I'd love to collaborate, yes. So there's a few different ways that I would recommend. The first is that if you're a scientist in an industry specifically, you can sign up for our collaborative seminar that I host monthly, where we bring in technology and solutions providers, all the people that reach out to me that are like, I have this really cool technology. How do I get involved with cultivated meat? And I say, come on our seminar and present, and the industry will listen to you. And if they want to work with you, they'll reach out to you. So that's the format of this call. Raise your hand if you've been on these calls before. A couple people in the audience, so great. So yeah, this is, we're growing this list. It's invitation only for industry. But that doesn't mean we are excluding academic researchers. A lot of these recordings get posted publicly on our YouTube channel, where you can watch them and then contact the companies that participate. But the reason why it's invitation only is because I'm trying to use this as the main communication channel to announce these sorts of things to the industry. So, I can email CEOs all day, but their inboxes are full. So we need actual scientists at these companies to sort of hear, run it up the chain. Should we participate in this study? How can we get involved? That sort of thing. But I need to know who you are. It's hard to keep track of hundreds of people. So that's one way to do so. And you can message me on LinkedIn or email me. Find me here right after. I have a QR code that you can scan if you want to sign up if you're a scientist in industry. You can also just connect and follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to be more active on there to announce certain things like these opportunities. And we also incorporate these things more and more in our newsletters. So we have a variety of newsletters online that you can sign up for. Great ways to just stay on top of the industry in general. If you're a scientist working in academia, we also have a resource for you. This is our alternative protein researcher directory, which is really designed to just map out who's doing research on X, Y, Z, scaffolds, media, et cetera. It's set up to help people find collaborators if you want to apply to a grant together. If you're a student looking for a lab, for instance, this is highly, it can be of high utility for you. And so, if you want to collaborate and you're doing research, join this database. And you don't have to be an academic researcher. You can be a company too. So this is a good way to sort of maximize your visibility and say hey, we're open to collaborating. Here's what we're doing, and here's what we're open to working on as well. So thank you. And I'll take any questions.